Take the guest room, my husband told me when his pregnant sister and her husband showed up unannounced. Or move out. His sister even added with a grin, it's great if you're gone by the weekend. So I left. But just a few days later that smile vanished and panic took over. She's lying, Mom. Please tell me she's lying. Pack your things and take the guest room by tonight or just leave, it's your choice. My husband Julian delivered these words while spreading cream cheese on his morning bagel, as if he were commenting on the weather rather than ending our 7-year marriage. Behind him, his pregnant sister Gabriella stood in my kitchen doorway, one hand on her swollen belly, already measuring my granite countertops with her eyes. Actually, she added with a smile that belonged on a shark, it would be great if you're gone by the weekend. We need to start the nursery. The pharmaceutical contract I'd been reviewing slipped from my fingers, $22 million in consulting fees fluttering onto the Italian marble floor. I stood there in my home office still wearing my reading glasses, trying to process what couldn't be real. This penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park represented 15 years of 16-hour days, missed birthdays and sacrificed weekends. Every square foot had been paid for with my sweat, my strategic mind, my ability to solve problems that made corporate executives lose sleep. Excuse me. The words came out steady, which surprised me. Inside, my chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything vital and left only an echo chamber. Before we dive deeper into this story, if you've ever been underestimated or pushed aside by family who thought they knew better, please consider subscribing. Your support helps share these important stories of standing up for yourself. Julian didn't even look up from his bagel preparation. Gabriella and Leonardo need stability during the pregnancy. The master bedroom has the space they need, and the attached bathroom is essential for her morning sickness. He spoke with the practiced tone of someone who'd rehearsed these lines, probably while I was at yesterday's board meeting that ran until midnight. At 42, I'd built something most women of my mother's generation couldn't even dream about. Whitmore Consulting Group employed 12 people who depended on my leadership, my vision, my ability to navigate corporate restructuring with surgical precision. Just that morning, I'd called my mother in Ohio to share news of the pharmaceutical contract. Her voice had swelled with pride as she told her neighbor Margaret. I could hear her in the background. My Rosalie runs her own company. 12 employees. Margaret, who still believed women should focus on supporting their husbands' careers, had gone quiet at that. Now I stood in the kitchen I'd renovated with Norwegian marble and German appliances, watching my husband, the man I'd supported through his architectural licensing exams, whose student loans I'd paid off, whose career I'd advanced through my business connections, casually evict me from my own life. Julian. I set down my coffee mug carefully, the Hermes porcelain making a precise click against the counter. This is my home. I own this penthouse. We're married, he replied, finally meeting my eyes with the cold calculation of someone holding a winning hand. That makes it our home. And family needs come first. Gabriella moved further into the kitchen, her fingers trailing along my custom cabinets. These will be perfect for baby food storage, she murmured to herself, already erasing me from the space. Her husband Leonardo appeared behind her, carrying 2 suitcases, his man bun catching the morning light. He gave me the kind of nod you'd give a hotel employee, polite but dismissive. I have the Henderson presentation at 3, I said, my voice sounding disconnected from my body. The entire board will be there. We're restructuring their entire Asian supply chain. Then you'd better get packing quickly, Gabriella chirped, her hand making those circular motions on her belly that pregnant women seemed programmed to perform. We need to set up before my doctor's appointment at 2. The absurdity of it crashed over me. This morning I'd woken up as Rosalie Whitmore, CEO, owner of a $5 million penthouse. A woman featured in last month's Forbes article about female entrepreneurs disrupting traditional consulting models. Now I was being instructed to pack my belongings like a college student being kicked out of a dorm. Julian had returned to his breakfast preparation, adding sliced tomatoes with the concentration of a surgeon. This was the same man who'd stood at our wedding altar, promising to honor and cherish, who'd celebrated with champagne when I'd landed my first $1 million client, who'd made love to me in this very kitchen just last week. Preston and Associates passed you over for partner again, didn't they? The words escaped before I could stop them. His jaw tightened. That has nothing to do with this. But it had everything to do with this. For 3 years, Julian had watched younger architects advance past him, had attended holiday parties where spouses asked about my business first and his work second, had smiled through dinner conversations where his colleagues' wives gushed about my feature in that business magazine while he nursed his whiskey in silence. Mrs. Whitmore? Gabriella had taken to calling me by my formal title recently, despite being family. The movers will need access to the master closet. Could you leave your keys? Movers. They'd arranged movers before even telling me. I looked at the contract pages scattered on the floor, each one representing security for my employees, growth for my company, validation for every risk I'd ever taken. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. Goldman team confirmed for 3 p.m. They're excited about the partnership proposal. I have meetings, I said, though I wasn't sure who I was telling. I have obligations. Cancel them, Julian suggested, biting into his perfectly prepared bagel. Or work from a hotel. You love hotels, remember? All those business trips. The accusation hung there, unspoken but clear. All those nights building my empire instead of playing the devoted wife. All those conferences and client dinners and strategy sessions that had paid for this penthouse. His Audi, the lifestyle he'd grown accustomed to. Leonardo had started measuring the living room with his phone app, probably calculating where their furniture would go. My furniture. My carefully curated pieces from galleries and estate sales, each one a small victory. A tangible proof of my success. The guest room, Julian began, is a closet with a Murphy bed, I finished. It's temporary, he assured me, though his eyes suggested otherwise. Just until they get settled. Gabriella laughed, a tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. Oh, Julian, stop pretending. We all know this is better for everyone. Rosalie's always working anyway. She barely uses this place. Barely uses this place. The home where I'd installed a library of first editions, where I'd created a sanctuary from the brutal corporate world, where I'd thought I was building a life with someone who valued me as more than a convenient bank account. My phone rang. Marcus Thornfield's name appeared on the screen, the CEO from Singapore who'd been courting me for 6 months with an offer that would triple my current income. I'd turned him down 3 times because Julian had begged me to stay in New York, had promised we were partners, had sworn that our life here meant everything to him. I let it go to voicemail, though something in my chest shifted like tectonic plates realigning before an earthquake. The silence that followed Marcus Thornfield's unanswered calls stretched through the kitchen like spilled wine, staining everything it touched. I slipped my phone into my pocket, the weight of that missed opportunity settling against my hip. Gabriella had moved to the windows, her silhouette against the morning light calculating square footage with the precision of an appraiser. Leonardo, come look at this view, she called to her husband who was still dragging luggage through my foyer. We could put the baby's playpen right here where the morning sun hits. My coffee maker, the one I'd imported from Italy after closing my first major deal, caught her attention next. She ran her fingers along its chrome surface with the possessiveness of someone who'd already claimed ownership. The machine that had powered my early mornings, my late-night strategy sessions, my small ritual of control in chaotic days, reduced to another item in her mental inventory. Leonardo finally emerged fully into view, and I noticed he was wearing one of those linen shirts that screamed, "I'm creative and unconventional," but really just meant, "I refuse to work in an office." His hair was pulled into that ridiculous bun, and he carried himself with the unearned confidence of someone who'd never actually built anything from scratch. "This space has incredible potential," he announced as if his assessment mattered. "Once we optimize the feng shui and create proper energy flow, it'll be perfect for raising a conscious child." A conscious child. In my penthouse. That I'd purchased with money earned from solving problems for Fortune 500 companies while Leonardo was probably attending drum circles and calling it networking. "The movers will be here at noon," Gabriella said, not to me but to Julian, as if I'd already ceased to exist in my own home. "I've arranged for them to set up the nursery furniture in the master bedroom immediately." Nursery furniture? My voice cracked slightly. "You've already bought nursery furniture?" She turned to me with that patient expression people use with slow children or difficult employees. "We've been planning this for months, Rosalie." "Julian didn't tell you?" "Months." The word hit me in the chest, a physical sensation that made me reach for the counter to steady myself. I looked at Julian, searching his face for denial, for surprise, for anything that would suggest this wasn't the betrayal it appeared to be. But he was suddenly fascinated by the coffee grounds in the sink, scrubbing at them with the concentration of someone performing surgery. "How many months?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "Since we found out about the pregnancy," Leonardo supplied helpfully, apparently immune to the tension crackling through the room. 7 months ago. Gabriella wanted everything perfect before announcing the move. 7 months of secret planning. 7 months of my husband plotting with his sister while sleeping beside me each night. 7 months of lies wrapped in regular mornings, ordinary dinners, and routine I love yous that meant nothing. "Show me the guest room," I heard myself say, though the words felt foreign in my mouth. They actually smiled, all 3 of them, as if I'd finally come to my senses. Gabriella led the way with the confidence of a tour guide, her designer flats clicking against my hardwood floors. Julian followed, still avoiding my eyes, while Leonardo brought up the rear, typing on his phone with the urgency of someone with actual responsibilities. The walk down my hallway felt like a funeral procession. We passed my home office, where the pharmaceutical contract still lay scattered on the floor. We passed the library I'd converted from a spare bedroom, filled with first editions and signed copies from authors I'd met at various events. We passed the bathroom I'd renovated with a Japanese soaking tub, my one indulgence after a particularly brutal year of building the business. "Here we are," Gabriella announced, pushing open the door to what had once been our storage room. The space was maybe 8 by 10 feet, dominated by a Murphy bed that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. The single window faced the building's HVAC system, a view of industrial gray machinery and piping. The carpet, God, I'd forgotten there was carpet in here, was a beige that had probably been installed when the building was constructed in the 80s. The smell hit me immediately: dust, old paint, and something else, something like defeat. "It's perfect for your needs," Gabriella said, and I wanted to ask her how she could possibly know what my needs were. "Minimal distractions for all that work you do." Leonardo poked his head in, assessed the space, and nodded approvingly. "Very zen. You could really create a meditation practice in here." A meditation practice. In a room that smelled like abandoned dreams and looked like a prison cell with better lighting. "The bathroom is down the hall," Julian finally spoke, his voice carefully neutral. "You'll share it with guests when we have them." When we have them. Already speaking in terms that excluded me from the hosting, from the very concept of this being my home. "Where will I put my clothes?" I asked, noting the absence of a closet. "There's a wardrobe in the basement storage," Gabriella offered brightly. "We could have it brought up. Very vintage, very authentic." I stood in the doorway of that pathetic room, my body blocking their exit, and felt something fundamental snap inside me. Not break. Breaking implied damage, weakness. This was more like a rope being cut, a tether being severed. The part of me that accommodated, that compromised, that made excuses for Julian's ego and his family's treatment. It simply ceased to exist. "I need to make some calls," I said, stepping aside to let them pass. "Of course," Gabriella chirped, already moving back toward the master bedroom, my bedroom. "Take all the time you need. Within reason, of course. The movers will need access to everything." Julian lingered for a moment, perhaps sensing the shift in me, the absence of the wife who would normally argue, negotiate, try to find middle ground. But when I met his eyes, really looked at him for the first time since this ambush began, he flinched and hurried after his sister. I stood alone in that cramped room, listening to their voices drift from the other end of the penthouse. Gabriella was describing where the crib would go, how they'd need to baby-proof the windows, how the walk-in closet would be perfect for all the baby supplies. My walk-in closet, where my clothes hung in color-coded rows, where my shoes lined custom shelves, where I'd installed a full-length mirror that had cost more than most people's monthly rent. My phone buzzed. An email from my assistant about the afternoon presentation. Another from Goldman Sachs confirming our meeting. A text from my mother asking how my morning was going. The normal world continuing its rotation while mine had stopped, reversed, begun spinning in an entirely different direction. I walked to that pathetic window, looked out at the HVAC machinery, and made a decision. Not the emotional, reactive decision they probably expected. Not the tearful acceptance they'd choreographed. Something else entirely. Something that would require the same strategic thinking I applied to corporate restructuring, except this time I'd be restructuring my entire life. The sound of furniture being moved echoed from the master bedroom. My furniture. My life. Being rearranged to accommodate people who saw me as an inconvenience in my own home. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Marcus Thornfield's contact. My finger hovered over the call button as Gabriella's laughter drifted down the hallway, bright, confident, victorious. The laugh of someone who believed she'd won, who couldn't imagine that evicting me might be the greatest mistake of her entitled life. My finger remained suspended over Marcus Thornfield's contact as the morning sun crept across the guest room's hideous carpet. Instead of calling, I set the phone aside and made a different decision. One that would change everything. If they wanted to play games with my life, I needed to understand the rules they'd been playing by. The penthouse was quiet at 6 in the morning. Gabriella and Leonardo wouldn't surface before 10. People without real jobs rarely did. Julian had left for his office an hour ago, pecking my cheek with the mechanical precision of someone checking off a daily task. I padded barefoot through my home, feeling like an intruder in rooms I'd personally designed, and headed to my office where our shared desktop computer waited. Julian had never been good with technology. His passwords were variations of his birth date and our anniversary, dates that apparently meant so little to him that using them for security felt appropriate. I opened his email, my fingers steady despite the betrayal I was about to uncover. The inbox loaded and there it was, a folder labeled Family Planning. My stomach turned at the innocent-sounding name for what I instinctively knew would be anything but. The first email dated back 3 months. Gabriella had written, "Jules, she won't fight us if we present it right. You know how Rosalie is, she hates scenes. Just tell her it's temporary and she'll accept it." Julian's response made my hands shake. "You're right. She has plenty of money anyway. The business is doing so well she won't even notice the financial adjustment. Plus, she avoids confrontation like the plague. We can make this work." Financial adjustment. Like I was a budget line item to be optimized. I scrolled through weeks of planning, each message another cut. They'd discuss timing, waiting until after my biggest contract closed so I'd be too busy to resist properly. They'd strategized about the approach, sudden and decisive, giving me no time to mount a defense. Gabriella had even researched tenant laws, concluding that as Julian's wife, I had minimal rights if he chose to support his pregnant family member in need. One message from 2 weeks ago stopped my breathing entirely. Julian had written, "I've been thinking about the trust situation. Rosalie must have family money she hasn't mentioned. No one builds a business that fast without seed capital. Her father died years ago. There had to be life insurance. I'll do some digging." My phone rang, shattering the morning silence. My mother's picture appeared on the screen. A photo from last Christmas, her wearing the cashmere sweater I'd sent, smiling beside her small tree in Ohio. "Morning, Mom," I answered, trying to steady my voice. "Rosalie, honey, something strange happened yesterday." Her voice carried that worried tremor that appeared whenever she sensed trouble. "Julian called me. He was asking about your father's insurance policy, wanting to know if there were investments we hadn't told him about." The room spun slightly. "What did you tell him?" "The truth, that your father's insurance barely covered his final medical bills and the funeral. You know that, sweetheart. We used every penny for his cancer treatment." She paused and I could picture her in her small kitchen, clutching her coffee mug with both hands. Why would Julian ask about that? After 8 years. "He's confused about some financial planning," I lied smoothly. "Don't worry about it. Rosalie." Her voice sharpened with maternal intuition. "What's really happening? You sound different." I couldn't tell her that her son-in-law was excavating our family tragedy for non-existent gold. That he was so certain I had hidden wealth he was willing to disturb my grieving mother with questions about her dead husband's finances. "Everything's fine, Mom. I need to go. Early meeting." After hanging up, I returned to the emails, but my vision was blurring. Not with tears, those would come later, but with rage. Pure, crystalline rage that made everything suddenly clear. They hadn't just planned to take my home. They'd planned to inventory my entire life for assets they could claim. A new message appeared in Julian's inbox as I watched. From Gabriella. "The movers are confirmed for noon. Once her stuff is in the guest room, phase 2 begins. Dad's lawyer says if she abandons the marital home, it strengthens Jay's position for the assets division." Assets division. They were planning for a divorce I hadn't even contemplated. positioning me as the one who'd abandoned the marriage by leaving the home they were forcing me out of. I screenshot everything, emailing the evidence to my personal account with the systematic thoroughness I applied to corporate audits. Then I cleared the browser history. Let them think their secret remained safe. Back in the guest room, I opened my filing cabinet, searching for normal documents but finding something else entirely. The Thornfield International folder sat there like a beacon. Marcus Thornfield had pursued me for months, offering a position that would triple my current income. Chief Strategy Officer for their Asian expansion, based in Singapore with a compensation package that included a Marina Bay apartment and a driver. I'd declined 6 months ago, sitting in this very room when it was still just storage, while Julian stood behind me, his hands on my shoulders, telling me how much New York meant to us, how we were building something special here. Our life is here, Rosalie, he'd said. Our future is here. Our future. He'd already been talking to Gabriella about moving her in when he said those words. The doorbell rang, interrupting my spiral into revelation. Sarah stood in my doorway, my best friend since college, wearing her tennis whites and an expression of barely contained fury. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the penthouse. She froze, seeing Leonardo's meditation mat in my living room, Gabriella's pregnancy books scattered on my coffee table. "My God, it's true." "What's true?" I already knew. Sarah had connections everywhere. The country club, the charity boards, the invisible network of information that flowed through Manhattan's upper echelons. I was at the club yesterday. Gabriella was holding court at the juice bar, telling anyone who'd listen how she'd finally put that career woman in her place. Sarah's hands clenched around her tennis racket. She said Julian deserved better than a wife who thought she was so important. Said you were jealous of her pregnancy and that's why you had to be removed. Like a stain or an inconvenience. "There's more," Sarah continued, her voice dropping. "She's been planning this since she got pregnant. 7 months, Rosalie. She told her book club you'd probably try to claim mental instability from work stress, so they needed to act fast before you had a breakdown that would complicate things." I sank onto the Murphy bed, which groaned under even my slight weight. They'd pathologized my success, weaponized my work ethic and transformed my achievements into evidence of instability. The precision of their character assassination was almost admirable. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, sitting beside me. I looked at the Thornfield folder, then at my phone where the screenshots waited like loaded weapons. "I'm going to give them exactly what they want," I said. "And then I'm going to disappear with everything they never knew they needed." Sarah squeezed my hand before leaving, her parting words echoing in the guest room. "Whatever you're planning, be careful. And if you need anything, money, a place to stay, an alibi, just call." After she left, I sat in that cramped space for exactly 5 minutes, allowing myself that small window of stillness before transforming into someone Gabriella and Julian had never met. A strategist who understood that revenge required the same meticulous planning as any corporate takeover. That afternoon, while Gabriella hosted her prenatal yoga instructor in my living room and Leonardo conducted what he called a creative visioning session on my balcony, I slipped out with my laptop bag and a story about an emergency client meeting. The lie came easily. After all, I'd been trained by experts in deception. My first stop was a coffee shop 20 blocks away where no one from Julian's circle would venture. I opened my laptop and began creating what I would later think of as my war documents. Every receipt, every invoice, every bank statement from the last 7 years materialized from my cloud storage. The kitchen renovation alone had cost $32,000. Italian marble countertops, German appliances, custom cabinets that Gabriella was now filling with her organic pregnancy supplements. The documentation was overwhelming in my favor. The custom furniture from the Chelsea showroom. Mine. The smart home system that Julian could never figure out how to operate. Installed with my bonus from the Morrison account. Even the art on the walls. Pieces I'd carefully collected from emerging artists who were now established names. All purchased with my money, all traceable through my business credit card. My phone buzzed. Marcus Thornfield's assistant, a wonderfully efficient woman named Patricia, spoke with the kind of clarity that made complex things simple. "Ms. Whitmore, Mr. Thornfield wanted me to confirm your acceptance of the position. The contract is ready for your signature, and we can arrange for the relocation team to begin immediately." "How immediately?" I asked, watching a couple at the next table share a dessert, blissfully unaware that marriages could detonate without warning. We could have you in Singapore within 2 weeks. The apartment is already vacant and furnished. Your signing bonus of $200,000 would be deposited upon contract execution. $200,000. Enough to start fresh without looking back, without begging, without compromising. Send the contract, I heard myself say. I'll sign it today. After ending the call, I sat in my car in the parking garage, staring at the concrete wall in front of me. This building where Julian and I had lived for 5 years suddenly felt like a tomb I'd been buried in alive. But now I could see daylight, could feel the dirt shifting above me as I clawed my way out. The next morning, Tuesday, I met with Rebecca Chin. Not my lawyer friend but my actual attorney, the one who'd helped me structure my business to protect it from exactly this kind of situation. Her office smelled of leather chairs and old money, the kind of place where devastating life changes were discussed in measured tones. The Penthouse lease is in your name only, she confirmed, studying the documents I'd brought. Julian insisted on that, didn't he? To protect his assets from your business liability. She smiled, the expression sharp as a blade. Ironic how that works out. You can terminate the lease with 60 days' notice, or transfer it to him if he qualifies financially. Based on what you've shown me about his income, he doesn't. Wednesday's mission was the money. I arrived at Chase Bank at 9 in the morning sharp, where my personal banker Thomas had been managing my accounts for 6 years. The joint account held exactly $3,043. Groceries and utilities money. Everything else, the real money, sat in my business accounts that Julian couldn't touch. I need to close the joint account and remove Julian as a beneficiary from everything else, I told Thomas, who didn't even blink. In his line of work, he'd probably seen every version of marital destruction. Will you be needing new cards? He asked, fingers already flying across his keyboard. Everything new. New numbers, new passwords, new everything. The credit cards Julian carried. The ones he used for his expensive lunches with clients, his golf club membership, his monthly wine subscription, all cancelled with a few keystrokes. By the time he tried to use them, I'd be gone, and he'd have to explain to the waiter why his card was declined. Thursday brought the movers. Not for the actual move, that would come later, but for the assessment. I met them at a storage facility in Queens, where they catalogued everything I planned to take. The list was extensive and precisely legal. Every item photographed, every receipt matched. The moving coordinator, a former military logistics officer named Marcus, appreciated my thoroughness. Saturday morning, 8 o'clock sharp, he confirmed. 3 trucks, 20 men. We'll have you cleared out in 4 hours. That evening I called my mother. She answered on the first ring as if she'd been waiting by the phone. The conversation I dreaded turned into something else entirely. I'm leaving Julian, I said simply. Finally, she exhaled, and I could hear years of bitten tongues in that single word. That man never deserved you. Your father never liked him, said he had weak handshake energy. Mom, I'm moving to Singapore. Silence stretched between Ohio and New York. Then, how soon? 2 weeks. I'll overnight you something, she said, and I could hear her moving through her house, opening drawers. Your grandmother's pearls. She wore them when she left your grandfather. Did I ever tell you that story? Left him in 1952 when she caught him with his secretary. Took those pearls and her children and never looked back. Friday morning the package arrived. The pearls lay in their velvet box like drops of moonlight, accompanied by a note in my mother's careful cursive. Were these in Singapore? New beginnings deserve old blessings. P.S. Your father left something else. Check the bottom of the box. Beneath the velvet lining was a slim envelope. Inside, a cashier's check for $50,000 and another note. Your dad's secret account. He always said it was for when you finally decided to fly. Consider this his permission to soar. My father, dead 8 years, still protecting me. The tears came then, silent and steady, as I sat in that horrible guest room clutching pearls worn by women who'd refused to shrink themselves for anyone's comfort. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand, carefully placing the pearls back in their velvet box. The cashier's check felt surreal in my hands. My father reaching across death itself to fund my escape. I tucked everything into my laptop bag, the one place in this prison where privacy still existed, and emerged from the guest room to find Gabriella directing a catering team through my kitchen. Oh, Rosalie, perfect timing, she chirped, not bothering to look at me while she pointed the deliveryman toward my dining room. We're having a little dinner party tonight. Nothing fancy, just some of Julian's colleagues from the firm. You don't mind, do you? The question was rhetorical. She'd already arranged my sterling silver on the table, the set my grandmother had given me as a wedding gift. My Waterford crystal glasses caught the afternoon light, arranged with the precision of someone who'd been planning this performance for weeks. Who's coming? I asked, though the damage was already done. The Prestons, the Wheelers, that new partner Julian's been trying to impress. Mitchell something. Maybe 12 people total. She finally looked at me, her hand making those endless circles on her belly. You'll join us, won't you? Though perhaps you could eat in the kitchen? We're a bit tight on space. By 7 that evening, my penthouse had transformed into Gabriella's stage. She floated between guests in a flowing dress that emphasized her pregnancy while somehow maintaining elegance, accepting compliments on her home with the practiced grace of someone who'd rehearsed every response. Julian's colleagues and their wives clustered in my living room, admiring the view I paid for, the furniture I'd selected, the art I'd collected. Gabriella, this space is absolutely stunning, gushed Mrs. Preston, the senior partner's wife whose approval could make or break careers at the firm. You have such exquisite taste. Thank you so much, Gabriella purred, her hand resting on my Danish sideboard. We've worked so hard to make it perfect for the baby. I stood in the corner holding a glass of wine I couldn't bring myself to drink, watching this elaborate theft unfold in real time. Julian moved through the room with unusual confidence, playing the successful host in the home he contributed nothing toward, occasionally glancing at me with something between warning and smugness. Excuse me. Mrs. Wheeler appeared at my elbow, her voice pitched low with confusion. I'm sorry, but who are you? Are you with the catering team? The room didn't go silent, but I felt the shift in attention, the subtle turn of heads waiting for my response. Julian started moving toward us, his face already arranging itself into an explanation, but I spoke first. I'm Rosalie Whitmore, Julian's wife. I own this penthouse. Mrs. Wheeler's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. Oh, I'm so sorry. I just assumed Gabriella seemed to be. It's an easy mistake, I said, my voice carrying just enough edge to make Julian freeze mid-step. I'm staying in the guest room temporarily while Gabriella and Leonardo prepare for their baby. The confusion rippling through the room was almost worth the humiliation. Almost. Mrs. Preston's sharp eyes moved between Gabriella, Julian, and me, calculating social dynamics with the precision of someone who'd navigated Manhattan society for decades. How generous of you, she finally said, though her tone suggested she found it something else entirely. Gabriella swooped in then, all gracious smiles and deflection. Rosalie's been so accommodating. She works such long hours anyway, the guest room is really more practical for her schedule. The evening deteriorated from there. I retreated to the kitchen under the pretense of checking on the caterers, but really to escape the suffocating performance of my own erasure. That's where Leonardo found me an hour later, wine flushing his cheeks and loosening his already minimal filter. You know, you're really lucky, he slurred, leaning against my refrigerator with the confidence of someone who'd never been told he was unwelcome. Gabriella wanted you gone completely. Day 1. Out on the street. How fortunate for me, I managed, watching him sway slightly. But Julian, smart man, he said no, no, no. Leonardo wagged his finger for emphasis. He said we need her rent money for a few more weeks, just until the next bonus cycle. Then, he made a gesture like tossing garbage. Then you can go. The words landed exactly as intended, not like a revelation but like confirmation of what I'd already suspected. I wasn't just being replaced, I was being financially drained first, squeezed for every last dollar before being discarded. Interesting, I said, filing this confession away with all the other evidence I'd been collecting. Leonardo grabbed an open bottle of wine from the counter, a $200 Bordeaux I'd been saving for something special, and poured himself another glass. Gabriella's got it all figured out. Always has. Even before. He stopped himself, suddenly aware he might be saying too much. Before what? I prompted, but he was already shuffling back toward the party, muttering about finding his wife. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and strategic avoidance. I watched Gabriella hold court in my living room, watched Julian accept congratulations on his beautiful home, watched my life being rewritten in real time with me cast as barely a footnote. Then at precisely 10:30 Gabriella's hand flew to her stomach. "Oh," she gasped, loud enough to halt conversations. "Oh no. Julian, something's wrong." The performance was magnificent. Julian rushed to her side, guests parted like the Red Sea, and within minutes they were heading for the door, Gabriella leaning heavily on her brother while insisting she didn't want to worry anyone. "Rosalie will handle cleanup," Julian called over his shoulder. "Won't you, darling?" The door closed on their manufactured emergency, leaving me with Leonardo, 12 confused guests, and the wreckage of a dinner party I hadn't thrown. Mrs. Preston lingered, her keen eyes taking in the scene with the clarity of someone who'd witnessed plenty of marital disasters. "Interesting evening," she said carefully, then leaned closer. "I knew your father, you know. Before he passed. He would not have tolerated this." She left before I could respond, but her words stayed as I spent the next 2 hours cleaning up. Leonardo sprawled on my sofa asking periodically if I could bring him water or perhaps something to eat. The cramps, I knew, would miraculously resolve the moment Julian confirmed I'd handled everything. At 2 in the morning my phone buzzed. Sarah had sent a series of screenshots that made my blood turn to ice. Gabriella's private Instagram, the one she thought was secure, told a different story than the one they'd been selling. Posts from months ago showed my penthouse. "Cannot wait to raise our baby here," dated 2 weeks before she'd announced her pregnancy to Julian. "Planning the nursery in our new home from 6 weeks ago. So grateful everything is falling into place from 3 months back." This wasn't opportunistic. This was premeditated, calculated, executed with the precision of a heist. And I'd been marked from the beginning. I stared at Sarah's screenshots until my eyes burned, the timestamp showing 2:47 a.m. Leonardo was now snoring on my sofa, his empty wine glass tipped sideways on my coffee table, leaving a ring that would normally have sent me scrambling for a coaster. Instead, I left it there, a small rebellion, and walked to my bedroom window. The city sparkled below, indifferent to the quiet devastation of marriages, and I made my final decision. Saturday would be my Independence Day. I barely slept, running through logistics in my mind with the precision I usually reserved for multimillion-dollar mergers. At 5 a.m. I rose, showered in the guest bathroom with its inconsistent water pressure, and dressed carefully. Black slacks, white silk blouse, and around my neck my grandmother's pearls. The outfit of someone conducting serious business. By 7:45 a.m. I stood in the lobby, watching through the glass doors as 3 large trucks turned onto our street. The doorman, Robert, who'd witnessed 7 years of my marriage, gave me a knowing nod. "Big day, Mrs. Whitmore?" "The biggest, Robert. And it's Ms. Whitmore now." At exactly 8 a.m., 20 movers flooded through the entrance with the coordinated precision of a military operation. Marcus, the lead coordinator, approached with his clipboard and a team of professionals who knew exactly what they were doing. I'd provided floor plans, photographs, and itemized lists. Every piece tagged with colored dots, green for take, red for leave. The red items were few: Julian's gaming chair, the Murphy bed, and a lamp Gabriella had brought from her old apartment. "We'll start with the large furniture," Marcus confirmed. "Work our way down to boxes. 3 hours, maybe 4. "Perfect." I handed him an envelope. "Coffee and pastries are in the truck outside for your team. They'll need the energy." The elevator began its steady rhythm. Up empty, down full. My sectional sofa went first, the one I'd special ordered from Italy after landing the Morrison account. Then the dining table where just hours ago Gabriella had held court with Julian's colleagues. Each piece that disappeared felt like removing a tumor, necessary and overdue. The noise finally penetrated the Saturday morning stillness. Leonardo appeared first, shuffling out in silk pajamas that probably cost more than most people's rent, his hair in complete disarray. What's happening? Why are there people here?" "I'm moving out," I said simply, checking off items on my list as movers carried my bookshelf past us. "Gabriella suggested I should leave by the weekend, remember? I'm simply taking her advice." His face went through a series of expressions as his hungover brain tried to process the scene. Then he saw them carrying the television, the 85-inch OLED I'd bought myself for Christmas, and something finally clicked. Wait. You can't take that. We use that." "You use things I paid for," I corrected. There's a difference between using and owning. Gabriella's entrance was more dramatic. She flew out of my bedroom, their bedroom now apparently, wearing a silk robe that gaped over her pregnant belly, her face twisted in outrage. Stop. Stop right now. You can't do this. Marcus and his team didn't even pause. They'd been well briefed on the possibility of hysterics. You can't take everything. Gabriella's voice hit a pitch that made several movers wince. This is insane. This is theft. I pulled out my phone, swiping to the folder I'd meticulously prepared. Would you like to see the receipts? The sofa, purchased March 2021, paid from my business account. The dining table, December 2020, my annual bonus. The kitchen appliances, I looked up at her with the sweetest smile I could manage. All mine. Every single piece. But we live here, she sputtered, watching as movers wrapped my artwork in protective blankets. You live in a space I'm no longer paying for, I clarified. How you choose to furnish it is your concern. Julian emerged last, and the sight of him almost made me laugh. His hair stood at strange angles, yesterday's shirt incorrectly buttoned, his face puffy from wine and sleep. He took in the scene, the empty living room, the bare walls, his sister near tears, and his expression cycled through confusion, comprehension, and finally panic. Rosalie, we need to talk about this. We needed to talk before you ambushed me with your sister's invasion. That window has closed. Let's be reasonable, he said, the phrase he always used when he wanted me to capitulate. This is extreme. Extreme. I watched as movers carried our bed frame past us. The California King, where he'd made promises he'd never intended to keep. Extreme was suggesting I move to the guest room. This is just practical. Where are we supposed to sleep? He actually sounded bewildered, as if furniture appeared magically without someone purchasing it. That sounds like a you problem, Julian. Perhaps Leonardo's creative consulting can manifest a solution. Gabriella had moved to tears now, her hand pressed to her belly in that protective gesture that had worked so many times before. How can you do this to a pregnant woman? To your family. Family. The word tasted bitter. Family doesn't exile family to storage rooms. Family doesn't plan secret coups for 7 months. Family doesn't treat each other like unwanted tenants in their own homes. Marcus approached, his expression carefully neutral. Ms. Whitmore, we're almost done. Just the kitchen items and your office furniture. Julian, Gabriella grabbed her brother's arm, her voice urgent. Do something. Call someone. This can't be legal. Oh, it's completely legal, I said, pulling out the documentation Rebecca had prepared. Every item being removed was purchased by me with my money from my accounts. The receipts are all here. Would you like copies for your records? The movers were efficient, systematic, thorough. My coffee maker, the one Gabriella had been using every morning, disappeared into a box. The smart home system got disconnected, leaving them with basic switches and manual controls. Even the expensive water filter I'd installed. Gone. As the last boxes loaded, I looked around the empty penthouse. The space looked massive without furniture, hollow and echoing. Gabriella stood in what was once our living room, tears streaming down her face. Leonardo had his phone out, probably trying to figure out how to spin this on Instagram. Julian stood frozen, still processing. One more thing, I said, pulling out the final document. The lease. I held the lease document in my hand, watching Julian's face drain of color as he recognized the letterhead from our building management company. This lease is in my name alone, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. You insisted on it, remember? To protect your assets from any potential business liability. The building management has already been notified that as of Monday, you're trespassing. You have 48 hours. The words hung in the empty penthouse like a death sentence. Julian's mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. Gabriella clutched her belly, but even that gesture had lost its power. Leonardo stood frozen, his phone still raised as if documenting this moment could somehow change its reality. 48 hours? Gabriella's voice cracked. But where will we go? That's no longer my concern. I turned toward the door where Marcus waited with the final inventory sheet for my signature. You wanted me gone by the weekend. Consider your wish granted. The elevator ride down felt like ascending from hell into daylight. Robert held the lobby door open as I walked through for the last time as Mrs. Whitmore, and I heard him murmur, "Well done, ma'am." My car was already packed with essential items. Clothes, documents, and my grandmother's pearls still warm against my throat. The drive to JFK Airport took exactly 53 minutes, during which my phone rang continuously. I'd switched it to silent, but the screen lit up with name after name. Julian, Gabriella, Leonardo, and then surprisingly Julian's mother Eleanor. Eleanor Whitmore, the woman who'd spent 7 years treating me like an interloper at family dinners, who'd repeatedly asked Julian when he was going to find someone more suitable, was suddenly desperate to reach the unsuitable daughter-in-law she'd never wanted. I waited until I was seated in the first-class lounge, a glass of champagne in hand before listening to the voicemails. They played like a symphony of desperation, each movement more frantic than the last. Julian's first message attempted authority. "Rosalie, this is ridiculous. Call me back immediately so we can sort this out like adults." His fifth message had devolved to pleading, "Please, we need to talk. You can't just leave us with nothing. This is your home too." Gabriella's messages were pure hysteria. "You can't do this. We have nowhere to go. Think about the baby. How can you be so heartless?" Leonardo had managed only one confused message. "Hey, Rosalie? Could you at least tell us how the coffee maker works? We can't figure it out." But Eleanor's message was the most revealing. "Rosalie dear, there seems to be some misunderstanding. Julian needs you to be reasonable. The family reputation is at stake here. Call me back immediately." The family reputation. Not concern for my well-being, not acknowledgement of the betrayal, just worry about how this would look at the country club. 3 hours into my flight to Singapore, while I was somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, my phone connected to the plane's Wi-Fi and the messages resumed with renewed intensity. But it was Monday morning's call from Gabriella that provided the most satisfaction. I was settling into my new apartment, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Marina Bay, when her number appeared on my screen. This time I answered. "Julian said you have a trust fund," she sobbed without preamble. "He said there was inheritance money, family money you were hiding. Where is it, Rosalie? We need it." I set down my coffee, made with a simple machine that didn't require an engineering degree to operate, and let her words hang between continents. "Gabrielle, there is no trust fund. There never was. You're lying." Her voice pitched higher, desperation making her shrill. "Julian said your father left money. He said you had investments, hidden accounts." "My father left medical bills and a $50,000 life insurance policy that barely covered his final expenses," I said calmly. "Every penny you've been living on, every piece of furniture you've been using, every luxury you've enjoyed, it all came from my consulting firm. The business Julian called my little hobby, at dinner parties." Silence. Then, "But Julian promised, he said once you were gone we'd have access to money that never existed," I finished. "He lied to you, Gabriella. Or maybe he lied to himself so thoroughly he believed it. Either way, you've been conned by your own brother." The sound she made wasn't quite crying, wasn't quite screaming, something primal and defeated. "We have nothing. We have nowhere to go. The landlord locked us out this morning. Julian's credit cards don't work. We're sitting in Leonardo's car with our suitcases." "That sounds difficult," I said, surprising myself with the absence of satisfaction I'd expected to feel. Instead there was just emptiness, a hollow where my marriage used to live. By Tuesday the complete collapse had begun. Sarah, ever my faithful intelligence network, called with updates. Julian had been forced to explain to his colleagues why he'd suddenly lost his prestigious address. The story spread through his firm like wildfire, how he tried to steal his successful wife's home and ended up homeless himself. The Prestons, whose dinner party had been the final humiliation, were particularly vocal in their disapproval. "Mitchell, that new partner Julian was trying to impress, he's telling everyone," Sarah reported with barely concealed glee. "The whole firm knows Julian was essentially a kept man who bit the hand that fed him." Gabriella and Leonardo had found emergency housing in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, a far cry from the Manhattan penthouse she'd commandeered. Her Instagram had gone dark, the carefully curated lifestyle she'd documented now impossible to maintain. The baby's nursery she'd planned in my bedroom would now be a corner of a cramped space that probably smelled of other people's cooking and had windows facing a brick wall. Julian had moved back to his parents' house in Connecticut, A 43-year-old man returning to his childhood bedroom with nothing but wounded pride and empty promises. Eleanor, I heard through mutual acquaintances, was mortified. Her successful architect son reduced to a cautionary tale about greed and ingratitude. Wednesday evening, Singapore time, I finally called my mother. She answered on the first ring as if she'd been waiting by the phone since I'd left New York. "Tell me you're safe," she said without preamble. "I'm safe, Mom. I'm in Singapore. I got the job, the apartment, everything." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for a moment before my mother exhaled, a sound that carried 7 decades of wisdom and worry. "Good," she finally said. "And Julian? The family?" "They're managing," I replied, which was generous considering what I knew about their circumstances. 3 months had passed since that Saturday morning exodus, and Singapore had become more than just an escape. It had become home. My office at Thornfield International occupied a corner of the 32nd floor, with windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing a view of Marina Bay that still made me pause during conference calls. The space was mine to design, and I'd chosen clean lines, warm woods, and a single piece of art, a painting by a local artist that reminded me of new beginnings. My team of 30 professionals treated me with the kind of respect I'd forgotten existed. They called me Ms. Whitmore not because protocol demanded it, but because they genuinely valued my expertise. During meetings, when I spoke, people took notes. When I suggested strategies, they were implemented. There was no subtle undermining, no whispered comments about aggressive women, no need to soften my competence to protect fragile egos. The apartment Marcus Thornfield's company had provided exceeded every expectation. 23rd floor, 2 bedrooms though I lived alone, a kitchen where I cooked whatever I wanted without commentary, and a living room I'd furnished exactly to my taste. No committee decisions, no negotiations about color schemes, no justifying why I preferred modern over traditional. Every morning I woke to sunlight reflecting off the bay, made coffee in peaceful silence, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: contentment. My phone dinged with an email notification. The sender made me pause. Julian Whitmore. The subject line read, "Please read, important." I almost deleted it immediately, but curiosity won. 6 pages of dense text filled my screen, a rambling manifesto of regret, self-pity, and transparent manipulation. "I've been in therapy," he wrote, as if 2 months of counseling could undo 7 years of diminishment. "I understand now how I failed you. How I let family dynamics cloud my judgment. We had something special, Rosalie. We could have that again." The delusion was breathtaking. He wrote about our early days, conveniently editing out his constant need to be the more successful one, his subtle sabotage of my ambitions, his family's treatment of me as an outsider. He mentioned marriage counseling, communication workshops, even suggested I could keep my Singapore job and commute. The logistics alone were laughable: 15-hour flights for a marriage that had been dead long before Gabriella arrived. "I know you're angry," one paragraph read. "But anger fades. Love remains." Love. He'd chosen his sister over his wife, conspired to steal my home, tried to drain my bank accounts, and now he spoke of love like he understood the concept. I forwarded the entire message to Rebecca, my lawyer, with a single line: "Please add to harassment documentation." No response needed. The rest of the story reached me through professional networks and Sarah's detailed intelligence reports. Gabriella had delivered a healthy baby girl 2 weeks ago. The Instagram announcement was sparse. A single photo in what was clearly a cramped apartment, no designer nursery, no professional photography. The caption read simply, "Welcome to the world, Isabella." The comments section, Sarah noted with satisfaction, was notably thin. The society crowd had moved on to fresher scandals. Leonardo, according to LinkedIn, was now a freelance creative consultant, which translated to unemployed but unwilling to admit it. His last post about exciting new ventures had 3 likes, all from family members. The smoothie video that had been his claim to fame was buried so deep in his profile that new visitors would never find it. But Julian's fall had been the most complete. Preston and Associates had conducted a restructuring that eliminated his position. Corporate speak for, "Your scandal embarrassed us and you need to leave." He'd updated his LinkedIn to "seeking new opportunities," but in architecture, reputation was everything. Who would hire an architect who'd tried to architect his own wife out of her home? Sarah called one evening while I was preparing dinner. A simple pasta I could make exactly how I liked it, with no one complaining about garlic or suggesting improvements. "You'll never guess who I saw at Whole Foods," she said without preamble. "Eleanor Whitmore, buying generic brands and looking like she'd aged 10 years. Julian living with his parents. A man who'd spent years cultivating an image of success, now dependent on the charity of parents who'd expected him to be their retirement plan, not the other way around. And get this," Sarah continued. "Margaret Wheeler told me that Gabriella applied for a job at Nordstrom. In retail. Full-time. Can you imagine? The woman who acted like employment was beneath her, folding clothes for women who used to attend her parties." I stirred my pasta, feeling an emotion I couldn't quite name. Not satisfaction exactly, not pity either. Something more complex, like watching a building you once lived in being demolished. Necessary but tinged with the memory of what it once meant. That night, unable to sleep, I stood on my balcony overlooking the Singapore skyline. The city pulsed with life below, a place where no one knew me as Mrs. Whitmore, where my success wasn't threatening, where I could build something entirely my own. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Your grandmother would be proud. You didn't just leave a bad situation. You built something better." He was right. They'd wanted me gone, erased from their picture like an inconvenient detail. But in removing me, they'd removed the foundation everything else rested on. I hadn't destroyed them, I'd simply stopped propping them up. The tears that came then weren't for Julian, for the marriage that had died, or even for the years I'd wasted trying to make myself smaller. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of finally understanding that walking away wasn't giving up. It was the greatest victory of all. If this story of calculated revenge resonated with you, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Rosalie revealed the lease was in her name alone. Watching their faces realize the trust fund never existed. What was your favorite moment of justice? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more gripping stories of betrayal and triumph. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.